The courtroom was silent. Too silent. It wasn't the kind of silence you expect in a place like this, a silence that makes your skin crawl, a hush so deep that even the air around you seems to hold its breath. Maya sat at the witness stand, her small fingers gripping the edge, knuckles white. Her mother, Sarah, was seated beside her, looking both fragile and fierce. Her eyes were red, but there was a determination in them, a quiet resolve that could only be born from love and desperation. Judge Thompson, a man in his late 50s with graying hair and a no-nonsense reputation, leaned forward from his bench, his sharp gaze focused on Maya. He was used to seeing all kinds of things in his courtroom, but this was different. Maya shifted in her seat, her dark eyes glancing nervously at the lawyer sitting across from them. The opposing attorney, a man named Mr. Carter, was tall, dressed sharply in a dark suit, and had a reputation for being ruthless. He leaned back in his chair, watching Maya like a hawk. "Miss Maya," he said, his voice smooth but taunting. "Do you understand why you're here today?" Maya nodded, though her stomach churned. She didn't want to be here, not in front of all these strangers, not in front of her father, not with so much at stake. But she had no choice. Her mother needed her. "Yes," Maya said quietly, her voice small but steady. "I'm here to tell the truth." Mr. Carter raised an eyebrow. "And what is the truth, exactly, Miss Maya?" Maya felt her heart race, but she knew what she had to say. She had practiced these words over and over in her head. "My mom, she's a good mom. She loves me. She always takes care of me." The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh, but then something happened. Maya's fingers, almost instinctively, moved toward the floor beneath her chair. She made a subtle motion with her hand, a small, deliberate signal. From under the table, the dog, Max, who had been lying there quietly since the trial began, looked up. His dark brown eyes met Maya's. He didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't even stir from his spot. But he knew. He always knew. Maya's signal was small, almost imperceptible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But Max, the large, black and white shepherd who had been by her side since she was a baby, understood. He had been trained to respond to this exact moment, this exact situation. For a split second, the entire courtroom seemed to freeze. Max's gaze never wavered from Maya, and the tension in the air grew thicker. Judge Thompson's eyes widened. His gavel, which had been resting on the desk beside him, was suddenly picked up and held in his hand, poised but unmoving. The hairs on the back of Maya's neck stood up as she realized what had just happened. A ripple of confusion swept through the room. The lawyer's voice, once calm, now held a note of uncertainty. "Your Honor, what is happening here?" The judge cleared his throat, a frown creasing his brow. "Miss Maya, what was that?" Maya could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know how to explain it. She didn't even fully understand herself. She had just done what her mother had taught her in case something like this ever happened. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "If ever you're in danger, Maya, if ever you need help, you give Max the signal. He will always be there for you, no matter what." Maya swallowed hard and looked at Max again. She didn't know how to answer the judge. She wasn't sure she even wanted to. The weight of the courtroom's gaze felt unbearable. But Max, steady and calm, seemed to offer her the strength she needed. Judge Thompson put his gavel down, and the room fell into a heavy silence. He exchanged a glance with the bailiff, and then he leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Miss Maya, would you care to explain to the court what just happened?" The words felt heavy in Maya's mouth, but she knew she had no choice. I gave Max a signal. He's my dog. My mom taught me to do it if I ever needed help. If I needed him to help me or make sure I'm okay." The judge's eyes narrowed as he looked at Maya. "And why would you need to signal your dog, Miss Maya?" Maya's heart pounded harder now. She couldn't answer that question without revealing too much, without showing the cracks in the life she had tried so hard to protect. Her mother, sensing Maya's distress, reached over and gently placed a hand on her daughter's. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice steady but full of emotion, I taught Maya that signal for her safety. Max has always been there for her. He's more than a dog. He's a protector, a companion, a part of our family." Judge Thompson seemed to hesitate. He glanced over at the opposing attorney, whose brow was furrowed in confusion and frustration. The judge, a man known for his tough demeanor, was clearly unsettled. "Mr. Carter, do you have anything to add?" Mr. Carter didn't respond immediately. He appeared taken aback, as though trying to process what had just unfolded. "No, Your Honor," he said after a long pause. I don't think that's relevant." The judge gave a sharp nod, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well. We will take a brief recess. Everyone stay in place while I discuss this further." As the judge left the bench, the room erupted into quiet murmurs. Maya's heart was still racing, but she felt an odd sense of relief. She had done something right. She had followed her mother's instructions, trusted Max, and somehow, it felt like everything had shifted. Max stayed exactly where he was, his eyes still fixed on Maya, as if telling her it was okay. They didn't need words. He always knew what she meant. Always. As the recess stretched on, Maya's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Why had she done that? What had just happened? But through it all, one thing was clear, the bond she shared with Max was undeniable, and in that moment, it had just changed everything. The world outside the courtroom might not understand, but Maya knew that Max had just given her something even more valuable than the truth. He had given her hope. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Maya sat back in her chair as the courtroom buzzed with quiet conversations, the tension still thick in the air. The recess had given her a few moments to collect her thoughts, but her mind was a whirlwind of memories, of moments spent with her mother and Max, of things she hadn't thought about in years. She looked at her mother, sitting beside her, her hands clasped tightly together. Sarah's face was pale, her eyes tired, but there was an undeniable strength in the way she held herself. Maya knew her mother had been through so much, things she didn't fully understand, but things that had shaped the woman sitting next to her. "Mom," Maya whispered, her voice small. "Is everything going to be okay?" Sarah turned to her daughter and smiled softly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll be all right, Maya. We've been through a lot, haven't we?" Maya nodded, but the unease in her chest didn't go away. She had been through a lot, yes. But what if this was all too much? What if the courtroom, the judge, and all the people watching weren't on her side? What if her mother lost? As the room quieted down and the judge returned to his bench, Maya felt the weight of the situation press down on her once more. The courtroom was still, everyone waiting for the next move. The stakes had never felt higher. But for a moment, as the gavel struck, Maya's mind drifted back to the beginning, back to when everything had changed. It hadn't always been like this. When Maya was little, life had been simpler. Sarah and Maya lived in a small, cozy apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The walls were painted a soft shade of yellow, the kind of color that made you feel warm even on the coldest days. There were always smells of fresh-baked bread and the sound of Sarah's soft humming as she cooked dinner after work. Maya remembered those days as filled with laughter, warmth, and the comfort of knowing her mom would always be there. Sarah was her anchor, and Maya, her heart. But things began to change when Maya was around 6 years old. That was when her father, Stephen, started to drift away. At first, it was just the occasional late night, then the missed weekends. Soon, Stephen wasn't just absent from their home, he was absent from their lives. Maya didn't understand why. All she knew was that she missed him terribly. She missed the way he would pick her up and swing her around, how he would read her bedtime stories with exaggerated voices, and how they would go to the park on Sundays. But the park visits stopped. The bedtime stories stopped. And, most painfully, so did the love that once seemed unbreakable. Sarah did her best to shield Maya from the tension, but it was impossible to ignore. Stephen's absence created a void, a space that Maya couldn't fill. For the longest time, she wondered if it was her fault. Maybe she hadn't been good enough. Maybe she hadn't been the daughter he wanted. It wasn't until her 7th birthday that Maya understood the full extent of what had happened. Stephen didn't show up for her birthday party. He didn't call. He didn't even send a card. Maya sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window, waiting. When her mother found her later, her eyes were red from crying. "I'm sorry, baby," Sarah whispered, brushing a tear from Maya's cheek. "He's not going to be around anymore." Maya didn't understand it at first. She didn't know why someone would just leave. But over time, it became clear that Stephen's departure wasn't just a decision, it was a consequence of his own struggles, his own battles that he couldn't face. Sarah had to become both mother and father to Maya, working long hours to support them both. It wasn't easy, but she never complained. She kept a brave face, even when things got tough. When Maya was old enough to understand, Sarah sat her down and told her about the challenges they had faced, about the difficult times when they didn't know if they'd have enough to eat or if the bills would get paid. But through it all, Sarah had one constant source of comfort, Max. Max had come into their lives shortly after Stephen left. He was a scrappy pup, a mutt that had been abandoned in a nearby alley. Sarah had found him one rainy afternoon while walking home from work. He had been shivering, hungry, and alone. Sarah couldn't just leave him there, so she brought him home. From the first moment Maya met Max, she knew he was special. He had soft, brown eyes and a gentle demeanor, and even as a puppy, he was fiercely protective of her. Max became her best friend, her confidant, her protector, and the one who would always stay when others left. He stayed with her during the hardest times, when her father wasn't there and when Sarah worked late into the night. He would curl up next to her when she couldn't sleep, nuzzle her when she cried, and always be there when she needed him most. But Max was more than just a dog. Over the years, Sarah trained him, not just to be obedient but to be attuned to Maya's emotions. There were moments when Maya felt lonely or scared, moments when she had no one to turn to. And in those moments, Max knew exactly what she needed. It was Max who made her feel safe when she was terrified of being alone. It was Max who helped her through the long nights when her mother wasn't home. And it was Max who was there when she needed to feel understood, when the world seemed too big and too overwhelming for a little girl. As the memory of those years flooded back to Maya, she felt the familiar warmth of Max's presence. Even now, as she sat in the cold, formal courtroom, she could feel the comfort of his unwavering loyalty. Her mother had always told her that family wasn't just about blood. It was about the bonds you built, the love you shared, and the promises you kept. And Max, with his quiet understanding, had proven that over and over again. Maya took a deep breath and glanced over at Sarah, her mother's eyes full of silent reassurance. They had come so far together, and they would continue to fight for their family, no matter what the world tried to throw their way. "Mom," Maya said softly, her voice carrying the weight of all the love and trust she had for her mother. "I don't think I can do this without you." Sarah reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to do it alone, Maya. We've got each other. And we've got Max." Maya smiled faintly, a small but determined smile. Whatever happened in that courtroom, whatever came next, she knew one thing for sure: she would never be alone. The courtroom had settled into a tense quiet, the air thick with anticipation. After the brief recess, everyone took their places once again. The judge's gavel struck sharply, signaling the resumption of the proceedings. But despite the formalities, Maya felt like she was in a different world, one where everything was fragile, teetering on the edge of something unknown. Max lay at her feet, perfectly still, his eyes locked onto her. She found comfort in his presence. The bond between them was unspoken but undeniable. He knew, even before she did, when she needed him the most. Judge Thompson cleared his throat as he scanned the room. "We will now proceed with the hearing. Miss Maya, I'm sure you understand the seriousness of these proceedings. I'm asking you to be honest with this court." Maya nodded, her heart thumping in her chest. She wasn't sure how much more of this she could handle. It felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on her tiny shoulders. But one thing was certain, she had to be brave. For her mother. For herself. And for Max. The room fell silent again as Mr. Carter, the opposing attorney, stood up. His face was calm, too calm. It was the kind of calm that felt rehearsed, like someone trying too hard to appear unshaken. He straightened his tie and looked directly at Maya. "Miss Maya," he began, his voice smooth, like molasses. "I understand you've had some unusual experiences with your dog, Max. And I believe you've mentioned that he's been trained to respond to certain signals." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She could already feel the tension building. What would he say next? What was he going to twist into something bad? Mr. Carter continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "But tell me, Miss Maya, why do you feel the need to signal your dog? What kind of message are you trying to send him?" Maya felt her throat tighten. She knew what Mr. Carter was trying to do. He was trying to paint her as someone who was imagining things, someone who wasn't in control. He wanted to undermine everything she and her mother had worked for. He wanted to make Max seem like a distraction, something that could be dismissed as mere fantasy. She could feel her mother's hand gently squeezing hers, the only thing grounding her in this overwhelming moment. He's not just a dog," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "He's my protector. He helps me feel safe. When things get hard, he knows how to help. That's why I signal him. He understands me." Mr. Carter's smile was thin and cold. "Ah, I see. So, you're saying that your dog is the reason you feel safe in this courtroom? That his presence is enough to make you feel in control of your emotions?" His voice was dripping with sarcasm, like he couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. Maya's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't back down. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Max has always been there for me. When no one else was." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. Even Mr. Carter seemed momentarily thrown off guard. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared for Maya to stand her ground. But he quickly regained his composure. "I see," he said, his tone more condescending than before. "And you expect us to believe that a dog can understand these complex signals and, by some miraculous means, protect you from whatever danger you believe you're in?" The courtroom was still. Maya felt her heart race, her palms slick with sweat. She didn't know what to say next. But then, out of nowhere, she felt it. A shift in the room. A subtle change in the atmosphere that she couldn't quite place. It was like the air had thickened, like everything was about to come crashing down. Before she could process it, a loud, sharp bark erupted from under the table. Maya jumped, startled by the sound. It was Max. Max was growling now, his body tense, his eyes narrowed, fixated on something at the far end of the courtroom. He wasn't looking at anyone. He wasn't reacting to any of the people in the room. His focus was on something, or someone, that Maya couldn't see. Her heart skipped a beat. Judge Thompson's eyebrows shot up. "What in the world?" His voice was filled with surprise and confusion. Mr. Carter stood rigidly, his face a mask of disbelief. "This is highly irregular," he muttered under his breath, but the noise was enough to make the entire room freeze. Maya's breath hitched in her throat. Max's bark had been sharp, almost like a warning. He was on alert. And there was something about the way he was staring at the back of the room that made Maya's skin crawl. What was he sensing? Why was he so on edge? The bailiff, who had been standing by the courtroom doors, took a hesitant step forward. He looked as though he was about to say something when Max let out another growl. This time, it was more menacing, a sound that made the hairs on the back of Maya's neck stand up. Max's fur was standing on end, and his stance had shifted to one of absolute protectiveness. "Max!" Maya whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and confusion. She reached down toward him, her fingers brushing against his fur. "What's wrong, boy?" Max's ears perked up, his gaze unwavering from the back of the room. His body remained tense, and Maya could feel the weight of his warning in the air. "Order in the court." Judge Thompson's voice rang out, but even he sounded rattled now, his stern demeanor faltering under the strange tension Max had created in the room. Maya's eyes flicked nervously around the courtroom. What was happening? Why was Max acting like this? It wasn't just a dog's growl. It wasn't just a simple reaction. There was something more happening here. Something beyond her understanding. Something that no one else could see, but Max could. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, trying to steady her breath. "Please, Max, please be okay." Then, in the strangest of moments, the courtroom doors opened. The sound of footsteps echoed in the silence, and Maya's heart stopped. Someone had entered the courtroom, someone who wasn't supposed to be here. The door creaked, and Max's head snapped in that direction, his eyes narrowing even further. The person had arrived, and Max knew something they didn't. Maya couldn't breathe. This was just the beginning. The door creaked open with a groan that seemed too loud for the stillness in the courtroom. Everyone turned toward the sound. The footsteps were slow but deliberate, echoing across the cold floor. Maya felt her heartbeat quicken as she instinctively clutched Max's collar tighter, feeling his body tense even more than before. It was as if the air had thickened, and time had slowed down. The tension in the room had turned into a palpable, almost physical presence. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something she wasn't prepared for. Max, who had been growling softly at first, now let out a low, deep bark. His fur was standing on end, and his body was taut, like a coiled spring, ready to snap. His eyes locked onto the figure at the door. Maya's heart was pounding in her chest as she followed his gaze. A man, tall and thin, stepped into the room. He was dressed in a sharp, dark suit, his face pale with a sharp jawline. His eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, even though the courtroom was dimly lit. The stranger's presence was unnerving, too calm, too composed for someone who was just walking into such a high-stakes trial. There was an unnatural quiet to his movements, as though he had been here before. Everyone in the courtroom was staring at him, confusion rippling through the room. Who was this man? Why was he here? He wasn't supposed to be a part of the proceedings, and yet, here he was. Judge Thompson adjusted his glasses and stood up straighter. "Who are you?" "This is a courtroom, not a place for interruptions." The man didn't answer at first. He just slowly removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were cold and calculating, eyes that felt like they could pierce right through to Maya's soul. He was staring directly at her, unblinking, his gaze making her skin crawl. "I'm here to make sure the truth comes out," the man said, his voice calm and eerily smooth, like someone who had practiced this very line for years. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. There was something off about him, something she couldn't place. He didn't belong here, none of this felt right. "I'm afraid you'll have to leave," Judge Thompson said, trying to regain control of the courtroom. "We're in the middle of a legal proceeding." The stranger took a step closer to the front of the room, his presence impossible to ignore. "I don't think I can do that," Your Honor, he said, his voice now carrying a strange authority that seemed to drain the air from the room. Max let out a low, warning growl again, his focus still unwavering. Maya, despite her anxiety, couldn't help but notice the way the stranger reacted. His face flickered for a moment, as if he'd been caught off guard. But just as quickly, his expression shifted back to that cold, calculating demeanor. Judge Thompson frowned, his patience running thin. This is your last warning, sir. Leave now, or I'll have you escorted out. But the man wasn't done. Instead of backing down, he took another step forward, his movements deliberate and precise. I'm afraid this courtroom is going to need a change of plans. You see, the truth isn't always what it seems. And sometimes, the people who claim to know the truth are the ones who need to be watched the most. Maya's heart raced. What was he talking about? His words didn't make sense, but the way he said them, so calm, so sure of himself, sent an icy shiver through her body. Before anyone could react, Max's body shifted, his muscles rippling under Maya's hands. He stood up, his low growl turning into a full bark. Max, no, Maya whispered urgently, but it was too late. The dog darted forward, toward the stranger. The courtroom gasped in shock. Even the judge looked momentarily stunned, his eyes wide. But the man wasn't afraid. He stood his ground, not even flinching as Max charged toward him. Maya wanted to scream, to stop him, but she was frozen in place. Her mind was racing. What was happening? What was Max sensing? Stop! Maya cried, her voice cracking. But Max wouldn't stop. He was inches away from the man now, his teeth bared, his growls deepening. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the man moved. His hand shot out, almost inhumanly fast, and grabbed Max by the collar, holding him still with a strength that made Maya's blood run cold. Max struggled for a moment, his body twisting in the man's grip, but the stranger's hold was unyielding. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. No one moved. No one knew what to do. Maya could barely breathe, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Let him go, she shouted, her voice rising in desperation. The man looked down at Max, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I'm sorry, but you don't get to control the situation anymore, he said, his voice calm but laced with something dangerous. With a single motion, he released Max, who immediately retreated to Maya's side, his body still tense, but the threat had passed, for now. Maya's hand was shaking as she reached down to comfort him, her heart still racing. She didn't understand what had just happened. She didn't understand how this man had been able to control Max so easily, to silence him so completely. Judge Thompson's voice finally broke the silence. This is unacceptable. You've disrupted the court in a way that can't be tolerated. Bailiff, escort this man out at once. But the stranger didn't move. Instead, he looked at the judge, his gaze unwavering. I'm afraid it's too late for that, Your Honor, he said, his voice colder than before. You've already heard too much. The truth is, I'm just getting started. The room seemed to constrict around Maya, the words echoing in her mind. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew one thing, this was far from over. The man's unsettling smile remained, his eyes still locked onto Maya. And in that moment, she realized something that made her blood run cold. The man wasn't here for her mother's case. He was here for her. Maya's world felt like it had tilted on its axis. The man's words echoed in her mind, leaving a sense of dread that seemed to seep into every corner of her thoughts. I'm just getting started. What did he mean by that? Why was he so fixated on her? She felt Max's body press against hers, as if he too could sense the looming danger, his eyes still watching the man with suspicion. The courtroom was silent, everyone watching the scene unfold in shock. Judge Thompson's gavel slammed down, his stern voice breaking the tension. Bailiff, the judge barked. Take this man into custody immediately. We cannot have this kind of disturbance in my courtroom. But the stranger remained unfazed, almost as if the judge's command held no weight. He didn't move, his eyes never leaving Maya. It was as if time had stopped, no one dared speak, no one dared move. The man's cold stare bore into her, and she felt her throat tighten, the air thick with tension. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, turning toward the defense attorney, who was still standing stunned beside his table, "please, make sure this individual is removed from the courtroom." But Mr. Carter wasn't looking at the stranger. His gaze was fixed on Maya, his eyes narrow and calculating. She didn't like the way he was watching her, like he knew something she didn't. He was the last person she wanted to trust in this moment. The bailiff took a hesitant step toward the stranger, his hand hovering over the radio at his waist. But before he could take another step, the man raised a hand, his fingers curling into a fist. It wasn't a threatening gesture, but it was enough to stop the bailiff in his tracks. "Do you think you can control me, officer?" the man said, his voice smooth, but there was a dangerous undertone. "I'm not the one who needs to be escorted out." Maya could feel the air shift again, the tension rising to a level she could no longer ignore. She reached down and gently patted Max, trying to calm him, but the dog was still on high alert, his body rigid. He sensed something more dangerous than the rest of them. Maya's thoughts were racing. What was this man's purpose? Why had he come into the courtroom, disrupted everything, and then left her in this state of confusion? Was it because of her or something else? Was she the target? Was there more to this than she understood? And how did Max know something was wrong before anyone else did? The stranger took a slow step forward, his eyes flicking briefly to Judge Thompson. "I wouldn't be so hasty, Your Honor. What you don't understand is that this case has already been decided." His voice was calm, but the certainty behind it sent a chill down Maya's spine. "What do you mean?" Maya finally found her voice, her words coming out shakily. "What are you talking about?" The man's lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't a friendly one. "Everything is already in motion. The truth you're fighting for, it's irrelevant." His eyes flicked back to the judge. "I suggest you reconsider the path you're taking, Your Honor. Because I will not be silenced." The room seemed to hold its breath, no one daring to interrupt. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what the man was insinuating, but she felt as if she were being pulled into something much larger than herself, something that had nothing to do with her mother's case, yet everything to do with her. Judge Thompson looked like he was about to say something more when suddenly the door to the courtroom opened again. This time, it wasn't the man, but someone else, an officer of the court. His face was pale, and he looked flustered, like he had just received some urgent news. "Your Honor," the officer said breathlessly, "there's been a security breach. We've just received reports of an unauthorized vehicle near the courthouse. It's parked suspiciously close." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted again, everyone turning to look at the officer. Maya's stomach dropped. Her thoughts raced. Was it connected? Was this man somehow involved? "Proceed with caution," Judge Thompson said, standing up from his seat. "Get security out there now." The man didn't flinch at the mention of the security breach. Instead, he slowly turned to look at Maya once more. "They'll never be able to stop what's coming," he murmured, almost to himself, but loud enough for her to hear. Max's growl returned, low and steady, as though the dog was picking up on the same feeling of danger. Maya's fingers tightened around his collar, trying to keep him calm. But it was no use, Max could sense it. And so could she. The courtroom had erupted into chaos now. Attorneys were on their phones, talking rapidly to their assistants and security officers. The judge was trying to regain control of the situation, barking orders. Maya didn't know what was happening, but everything felt wrong. So wrong. "Are you telling me this has been planned?" Maya said, her voice trembling. She was speaking directly to the stranger now, her mind struggling to piece together the puzzle. The man's lips curled into a smile. Planned? Oh, Miss Maya, this has been inevitable for a long time. Maya felt her knees go weak. She gripped the edge of the table for support. The sense of foreboding washed over her like a wave. What did he mean by inevitable? Was she in danger? Her mother? Max? She couldn't be sure, but the terror was growing with every passing second. The man began to turn toward the door, his pace slow and deliberate, his every movement precise. But before he left, he stopped and looked over his shoulder, his gaze locking with hers once more. "You'll see soon enough," he said, his voice carrying a chilling certainty. "The pieces are already in motion." Without another word, he exited the courtroom, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The room seemed to vibrate with the aftershock of his presence, but the question still hung in the air, unanswered. What was he really after? Maya felt the weight of the unknown press down on her. This man had come here with a purpose, and it wasn't just to disrupt a courtroom. It was something bigger. Something far more dangerous. As the tension in the room slowly began to subside, Maya found herself staring at the spot where the stranger had stood. Her mind was spinning, trying to process everything that had just happened. But deep down, she knew one thing for sure: whatever had been set in motion had only just begun. The hum of activity in the courtroom had quieted, but the tension still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Maya stood frozen, still holding Max's collar, her mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The man's cryptic words echoed in her thoughts, rattling her from within. The pieces are already in motion. What did that even mean? What was it that he knew, and why was he so sure that it was inevitable? Max remained by her side, his fur still bristled, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Maya crouched down to calm him, whispering soft words in an attempt to ease his anxiety. She wasn't sure who needed comforting more, her or him. As the courtroom began to settle, Judge Thompson cleared his throat and returned to his seat. His voice was more composed than before, but there was still a tremor of uncertainty beneath it. "I am calling a recess," the judge announced, his gavel slamming down. "We need to regroup and address the security situation outside the courthouse. Everyone, stay here, and do not leave the premises until further notice." Maya's heart sank. She didn't want to stay. She didn't want to be in this room, surrounded by all these people who were just as clueless as she was. But she had no choice. "Let's go outside and check the situation," Mr. Carter said, looking over his shoulder toward Maya as he turned toward the door. "Stay put," he added to the rest of the room, his tone firm. Maya barely registered his words. She was too distracted by the storm of thoughts swirling in her head. What was the man's connection to all of this? Why had he come for her? Her mother's case felt insignificant compared to whatever it was he was trying to get across. The very foundation of her reality was starting to crack. Max tugged at her, pulling her toward the back of the courtroom, as if trying to lead her somewhere. She followed him, almost instinctively. She needed answers. She needed to understand what had just happened. Before she knew it, Maya found herself standing outside the courthouse, her eyes scanning the streets, but she didn't see anything unusual. The parking lot was still full, the cars parked neatly, the air crisp with the cold. It didn't make sense. Where was the threat? Why had the stranger mentioned a security breach? She wasn't alone for long. Mr. Carter came up behind her, his steps quick and purposeful. "Maya, wait up," he called out. He reached her side and leaned in slightly. "Look, I know this is a lot to process, but I'm worried. That man, the one who disrupted the courtroom. I've heard rumors about him." Maya turned to face him, narrowing her eyes. "What do you mean?" Mr. Carter hesitated for a moment, as though weighing his words carefully. "There are whispers about a group of people who've been involved in some very dangerous activities for years. This isn't just some random disruption. He might be part of something bigger, something much more dangerous than any of us could have imagined. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. Dangerous activities? Her thoughts flashed to the man's unsettling presence in the courtroom. What could be more dangerous than a man disrupting a high-profile trial? What could he want with her? Who are they? Maya asked, her voice trembling. I don't know the full details, Carter continued, looking over his shoulder as though to make sure no one was listening. But they're connected to some very high-powered individuals. And I'm telling you, Maya, whatever's going on, it's not just about your mom's case. They've been watching you. The words hit Maya like a punch to the stomach. What do you mean, they've been watching me, she whispered. Carter's expression darkened. You've become a target. That man, and whoever else is involved, they've been keeping an eye on you for a long time. Everything you've done, everything you've said, they know about it. Maya recoiled, a chill creeping up her spine. Why? Why would they care about me? I don't know. But I do know that you need to be careful, he said, his voice urgent. This isn't just about your mother anymore. It's about you, your safety. And it's getting worse. Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. Why was this happening to her? Why was she being dragged into something so dangerous? Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Detective Harper, the lead investigator on her mother's case. His face was tense, his eyes scanning the scene as he approached Maya and Mr. Carter. Maya, we need to talk, he said, his voice low and serious. It's about what happened in the courtroom earlier. We're getting reports that there might be a connection between the man who interrupted the trial and a series of events that have been happening in the area recently. Maya's heart skipped a beat. What could he mean? Detective, Carter interjected, I think we need to consider the possibility that this man isn't just some random troublemaker. This isn't a coincidence. I agree, Harper said, glancing at the courthouse. We've been looking into some very unusual activity near the courthouse, and now with what happened today, I think it's time we start putting the pieces together. It's all connected, and it's not good. Maya stood in shock, her mind struggling to keep up with the gravity of the situation. The whole world around her seemed to be falling apart, and she didn't know how to stop it. Where's Max? She asked suddenly, her heart racing. She hadn't seen him in a few minutes, and the thought of losing him in all the chaos made her stomach churn. He's still inside, Harper said quickly. I'll make sure someone gets him. Good, Maya replied, though the fear she felt was overwhelming. She needed Max. He was the only thing she could trust in all of this. Carter turned to her. Maya, I think you need to get out of here. Go somewhere safe. This is bigger than you know. Maya shook her head, her resolve hardening. I'm not running. I need to figure out what's going on. I can't keep waiting for someone else to protect me. Harper's eyes softened, but he didn't argue. He just nodded. Be careful. And trust no one. The cold wind seemed to cut through Maya as she stood in that moment, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. Everything she thought she knew was unraveling, and now she had to find a way to piece it back together before it was too late. Max was right there with her, his presence a small comfort in the sea of uncertainty. She had no idea what was coming next, but she knew one thing for sure, the road ahead would not be easy. And no matter what, she couldn't back down now. Maya's pulse quickened as she walked away from the courthouse with Detective Harper and Mr. Carter. They were heading to a secure location nearby, a small office that the detective used for times when things got too messy in the field. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city streets. The cool night air made her feel more exposed, as if the darkness outside mirrored the uncertainty inside her. Max, her loyal protector, trotted beside her, his ears perked and eyes scanning the surroundings as though he, too, could feel the weight of the situation. Maya absent-mindedly reached down to stroke his back, finding comfort in the simple act. Max's presence was her anchor in all this chaos. Inside the small office, Harper shut the door behind them, and Carter immediately moved to a table in the corner, pulling out a set of papers. The office was dimly lit, with files scattered across the desk and a whiteboard on the wall covered in hastily written notes and photographs connected by red string, like something out of a detective drama. But this wasn't a show, this was real. Maya, Harper said, his voice steady but filled with concern, I need to be honest with you. I don't think this is just about your mother anymore. This whole thing goes deeper. A lot deeper. Maya's stomach twisted. What do you mean? Her voice was barely a whisper. The man who disrupted the trial today, he's connected to a larger group. This isn't just about your mother's case. They've been following you for months. Tracking your movements. Watching you, Harper said, his voice low. It's not just random. There's a reason you're being targeted. Maya felt the ground beneath her feet shift. Her thoughts raced, trying to make sense of everything. Why me? Why now? Carter walked over and placed a thick folder in front of her. We've been piecing things together over the past few weeks, he said, pulling out photographs of the man from the courtroom. This is the person we believe to be behind it all. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the image. It was the same man, the one who had stood in the courtroom, staring at her as if he knew something she didn't. His face was cold, calculated, like a man who had no fear. The photo wasn't high quality, but it was enough to make her blood run cold. His name is Elias Cross, Carter continued, leaning over the table. He's linked to a network of individuals with ties to some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in this city. He's not someone you want to cross. Maya's mind raced. Elias Cross. The name echoed in her thoughts, but she had no idea who he was. Why would someone like him care about me? Harper sighed. That's what we're trying to figure out. Cross has a history of manipulating people, pulling strings from behind the scenes. And he's always been one step ahead. He has connections in places we can't even reach. But here's what's most concerning. The people connected to him, they have a vested interest in what happens to your mother's case. And they don't want the truth to come out. Is that why they're targeting me? Maya asked, her voice barely audible. Carter nodded grimly. Exactly. The closer you get to uncovering the truth, the more they'll come after you. They'll do whatever it takes to stop you, Maya. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. It felt like the walls were closing in around her. She had thought the trial, her mother's case, was the worst of it, but now she realized it was only the tip of the iceberg. Whoever Elias Cross was, he was a puppet master, and she was caught in the strings. What are they trying to hide? Maya asked, her voice shaky but determined. Harper exchanged a look with Carter before answering. That's the question we're trying to answer. Cross and his network have been involved in some shady dealings, money laundering, illegal activities, corruption at the highest levels. We believe your mother uncovered something that could expose them. She was too close to something they didn't want anyone to know about. Maya's mind spun. My mother? She had always known her mom was an incredible woman, brave and determined, but she had never imagined she was digging into something like this. Her hands trembled as she reached for the photographs, staring at the blurry image of Elias Cross. What was the connection between him and her mother's investigation? Why would anyone go to such lengths to stop the truth from coming out? We need to find out exactly what your mother uncovered, Carter said, his voice low and urgent. And we need to do it fast, before they silence you too. Maya looked between the two men, her heart pounding in her chest. They were right. This wasn't just about her mother anymore. It was about her, her safety, her life. And the truth that was hidden in the darkness. She was in the middle of something bigger than she had ever imagined. And no matter how terrifying it was, she knew she couldn't back down now. Her mother's legacy, her fight for justice, was now her fight. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice firm. Harper and Carter exchanged another look, then Carter spoke. "We have a few leads. There's a person who might know more about what your mother uncovered. She's in hiding right now, but we believe she's the key. We need to find her before Cross does." Maya nodded, determination settling over her. "Let's go. We can't waste any time." As they headed for the door, Max trotted ahead, his instincts sharp as ever. The dog had always been her companion, but now it seemed like he was more than just a pet, he was her protector. And she would need him more than ever in the coming days. As they stepped into the night, Maya felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The truth was out there, but it was buried beneath layers of lies, deception, and corruption. And it was up to her to unearth it. But in the back of her mind, one question continued to haunt her: what would Elias Cross do next? The cold night air wrapped around Maya like a tight cloak as she, Detective Harper, and Mr. Carter moved swiftly through the dark streets. Max trotted beside her, his tail low, his senses heightened as though he, too, understood the gravity of what lay ahead. Maya's heart raced, not just from fear, but from the cold determination building inside her. Her mother's investigation, which had once seemed like a distant memory, was now front and center in her life, and she couldn't turn back. "I don't know how much time we have," Harper said, his voice low but urgent. "If Cross is really behind this, then he's likely already trying to cover his tracks." Maya nodded, her mind racing. "You said there was someone who knew more about what my mother uncovered. Where do we find her?" Mr. Carter, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "We have a lead. Her name's Veronica Hayes. She's someone your mother trusted, worked with on the case. She's been in hiding for weeks, and we've had no luck tracking her down. But we believe she's in a safe house nearby. If we're lucky, she'll still be there." "Why did she go into hiding?" Maya asked. The question had been lingering in her mind for some time. She knew her mother was smart and capable, but if Veronica had to hide, it meant they were dealing with someone powerful, someone dangerous. Harper's eyes flicked toward her, his expression grave. "Because she knew too much. Just like your mother." They approached a small, nondescript building nestled between two older brick structures. The lights inside were dim, but the door was slightly ajar. It was an inconspicuous location, which was exactly what they needed. Maya's chest tightened. This was real now. She wasn't a bystander in her mother's story anymore, she was in the thick of it. "Stay close," Harper said as they reached the door. He pulled it open cautiously, glancing inside before stepping through. Maya followed, feeling a twinge of fear in her stomach. They were walking straight into the unknown. The room they entered was small but clean, with minimal furnishings, just a desk, a couple of chairs, and a single window looking out onto the street. It felt sterile, like a place meant to keep people safe but not comfortable. Sitting in one of the chairs, a woman who looked to be in her mid-30s rose to greet them. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her eyes were sharp, as though she had been on high alert for far too long. Her features softened a little when she saw Maya. "Maya," the woman said, her voice soft but strong. "I've been expecting you." Maya froze, her heart skipping a beat. "You've been expecting me? How?" Veronica raised a hand, cutting her off. "I've been keeping tabs on everything that's been happening. Your mother was close to uncovering something, Maya. Something that could bring down the entire network." Maya's pulse raced. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. The answers, the truth, were so close she could taste it. "What did my mother find?" Maya asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. Veronica hesitated, as if weighing the risks of speaking out loud. "Your mother was tracking the money trail. She was getting close to finding a way to tie Elias Cross and his network to several unsolved cases. Corruption. Extortion. They've been running things for years, from the shadows. Maya's mind spun. But why me? Why would they come after me? Veronica's eyes softened. Because your mother was about to expose them, and you're now part of the equation. If they can't silence you, they'll make sure you can't get to the truth. Maya clenched her fists. The weight of the situation felt unbearable. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance, she was now a target. A part of something much bigger than herself. What do we do now? Veronica's gaze turned to the desk, where several files were scattered. We go after Cross. We have to follow the trail your mother started. Just then, a sharp noise from outside the building made everyone freeze. It was a single, muffled sound, a car door slamming shut. Maya's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was just paranoia or if they were being followed, but she wasn't willing to take any chances. We have to go. Now, Harper said, his voice commanding. Without another word, they moved quickly, taking the back exit. Maya glanced over her shoulder, trying to shake the feeling that they were being watched. Max, ever alert, seemed to sense the danger as well, his ears pinned back, his steps quickening. They made their way through an alley behind the building, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible. But it didn't take long before Maya noticed a black SUV parked at the far end of the alley. The vehicle had no markings, no identifying features, but Maya's gut told her it was trouble. Harper, sensing the same unease, motioned for everyone to duck behind a stack of crates. Stay low, he whispered. Max growled quietly beside Maya, his body tense as he watched the SUV intently. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. She felt it, a presence, a silent observer who was waiting for the right moment to strike. Whoever was in that car had been following them. Are we in danger? Maya whispered. Harper's eyes never left the vehicle. We're not sure yet. But they've been on our tail for a while. And they know more than we think. The tension in the air was suffocating. Maya's breath was shallow, her thoughts scattered. She had no idea who was behind the SUV, but one thing was certain, crossing Elias Cross and his network wasn't going to be easy. Suddenly, the door to the SUV opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out, scanning the alley as if he knew exactly where they were hiding. His eyes flicked toward the crates, but he didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Maya's heart stopped. They had to move, and they had to move fast. On my signal, Harper murmured. Max's growl grew louder, and the man's gaze flicked toward them just as Harper motioned for everyone to move. They broke into a run, dashing through the dark streets, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the pounding of their hearts. They had no time to waste. Maya's only thought now was survival, and finding the truth, no matter the cost. The night seemed to stretch on forever as Maya, Harper, Carter, and Max bolted through the dark streets. The alley behind them had become a trap, a place where their every move was being watched. Maya's chest heaved, her breath sharp and shallow, but she kept pushing forward, one step at a time. Max was a few paces ahead, his keen senses guiding them through the winding streets like a beacon in the night. Behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder. It wasn't just the SUV that had followed them, it was a team, someone who was clearly intent on catching them. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Maya could feel the weight of danger pressing on her from all sides, but there was no turning back now. Keep moving. Harper hissed, his voice sharp with urgency. Maya could hear him and Carter behind her, their footsteps steady, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the scene at the safe house. Veronica had just given her the first real glimpse of the truth. Her mother was deep into something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. And now, not only was Maya tangled in this web of corruption and deceit, but they were actively hunting her. They turned a corner, but the street ahead offered no shelter. There was nowhere to hide, not yet. Max barked ahead, his low growl turning into a full-on warning as the sound of the pursuing footsteps grew louder. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Whoever was behind them had gained ground. They were closing in. "We need to split up," Harper shouted as he skidded to a halt, his eyes scanning the street. "We'll confuse them. Carter, take the left. Maya, go right. Don't stop running until you reach the safe house. We'll meet you there." Maya barely had time to react before Harper pushed her toward the alleyway that veered to the right. Max, sensing the urgency, sprinted ahead, his paws clicking against the pavement as he shot into the darkened street. Maya followed, her breath a constant rhythm of panic, but determination coursed through her veins. There was no choice now. She had to get to safety. The sound of pursuit behind her made her legs ache as she pushed harder, her heart slamming in her chest. She wasn't sure how much farther she could go, but her mind kept telling her, "Don't stop." Every step felt like it might be her last, but she knew that stopping would mean giving up, and she wasn't ready for that. A screech of tires broke the night's stillness, and Maya instinctively ducked into the shadow of a building. Her pulse raced as she pressed herself against the cold brick wall, her fingers trembling around the edges of the map Veronica had given her. She was so close to the safe house. She could feel it in her bones. But the sound of a car door slamming shut made her freeze. She could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching again. She was being hunted. Max growled from the end of the alley, his low voice a warning. Maya didn't need to be told twice. She took off in the opposite direction, darting between buildings, the shadows closing in around her. She didn't look back. The alley grew darker, and Maya's breath grew heavier. Her legs burned, and her chest felt tight, but she pushed on, the map clenched tightly in her hand. The safe house had to be close now. It was the only place where she would be safe, where she could get answers. She had to make it there. Suddenly, a shadow darted out in front of her, a figure lunging from the darkness, blocking her path. Maya instinctively swerved to the left, but the man was faster. He reached out, grabbing her arm, pulling her back into the alley. A jolt of panic surged through her. This was it. She was caught. Max was on the man in a heartbeat. The dog lunged at him with a snarl, biting down on his wrist, forcing the man to release Maya. The man cursed loudly, stumbling back as Max stood protectively in front of Maya, his teeth bared. "Run, Maya!" Harper's voice called from behind her. Maya didn't need to be told twice. She broke free from the man's grasp, her heart pounding as she sprinted once more. She could hear Harper's footsteps gaining on her, but the sounds of struggle behind her made her hesitate just for a moment. She couldn't look back. Max was giving them the time they needed, and it was up to her to get to safety. The street ahead was a blur, but then she saw it, the familiar, unmarked door of the safe house. Relief surged through her, and with a final burst of energy, she reached the door and slammed her hand against it. "Open up!" Maya shouted. A moment later, the door creaked open, and Veronica's face appeared in the dim light. Her expression was tight, her eyes flicking quickly to Maya before she stepped aside. "Hurry!" Veronica urged. "We don't have much time." Maya dashed inside, followed closely by Max. She slammed the door shut behind them, her chest heaving as she leaned against it, trying to catch her breath. Harper and Carter arrived moments later, panting from their run. They too were inside within seconds, and the door was bolted behind them. The safe house, though modest, was the only place Maya felt like she could breathe again. "Are we safe?" Maya asked, her voice shaky as she glanced at the others. "For now," Harper said, running a hand through his hair, his eyes scanning the room. "But this won't hold them off forever. We need to figure out what Cross knows and how to stop him." Carter closed the blinds, checking the windows before nodding grimly. "We need a plan. And we need to move fast." Max padded over to Maya's side, his eyes still watchful as he lay down at her feet. Maya dropped to her knees, stroking his fur absently as she tried to regain her composure. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How did they find us so fast? We barely had a chance to breathe." "They're everywhere," Harper replied, his voice steady but tired. "Cross's people. They've been tracking us. And now that they know we're onto them, it's only a matter of time before they make their next move." Maya stared at the floor, her mind whirling with everything she had learned in such a short amount of time. Her mother had been right to be afraid. And now, she was more deeply involved than she ever could have imagined. Her journey had taken a sharp turn, but there was no turning back. The truth was still out there. And she was going to find it, no matter what. The silence inside the safe house was unnerving. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound from outside, made Maya's nerves flare. She tried to push away the fear gnawing at her, but it clung to her like a shadow. The events of the past few hours felt like a blur, adrenaline had kept her going, but now, with everything settled, the weight of what was at stake was sinking in. Her mother's legacy. The dangerous web they were tangled in. The unseen enemy that would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Max, sensing her unease, nudged her hand with his nose. She absent-mindedly scratched behind his ears, trying to ground herself. His presence was a small comfort in the chaos swirling around them. The dog had been her anchor through all of this. Without him, she wasn't sure where she'd be. Harper was pacing across the room, checking the locks on the windows and peering out through the blinds, his gaze sharp and watchful. Carter had his phone out, flipping through documents and notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Veronica, who had been unusually quiet, finally broke the silence. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice low but firm. "Cross knows we're getting closer, and he won't wait long before making his move. We need to act fast." Maya nodded, her mind racing. What could they do? They had barely escaped tonight, and it was only a matter of time before they came after her again. Every second counted. "So, what's the next step?" Maya asked, her voice determined, though uncertainty still laced her words. Veronica glanced at Harper, who gave a quick nod in agreement before stepping forward. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Harper said. "And the only way to do that is to find out what they're hiding. Cross is too powerful for us to take him head-on without the right information. We need a way in." "Like an insider?" Carter asked, looking up from his phone. Harper nodded grimly. "Exactly. We need to get someone on the inside. Veronica, you mentioned someone earlier, someone who might have information." Veronica's face tightened. "His name is Damon Parks. He's an associate of Cross's, but not fully trusted. He's been on the periphery for years, but I believe he knows more than he lets on. If we can find him, we might be able to get him to talk." "And how do we find him?" Maya asked. Veronica shifted, her eyes flicking to the window. "I know a place where he might be laying low. It's a seedy bar on the outskirts of town. If he's not at the bar, we'll have to hope we can track him down through his connections." Harper, never one to back down, turned toward Carter. "We'll need backup. We can't afford to make mistakes now. I'll go with Maya, and Carter, you stay here in case things go south." Carter looked up, his face serious. "Got it. I'll set up a safe line and track anything I can through the phone." Maya felt her stomach tighten. The idea of going out there, to the heart of enemy territory, was terrifying, but there was no other choice. Her mother's unfinished work, the trail she had started, was still out there, buried somewhere in the shadows. And Maya was the only one who could finish it. Harper turned to her. "You ready?" Maya swallowed hard, her throat dry. But she wasn't about to let fear stop her now. Not after everything she had learned. Not after what had happened tonight. She was in this, for better or for worse. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts inside her. Harper gave her a reassuring nod. Then let's go. The streets outside the safe house were deserted, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just occurred. The air was still, thick with the remnants of the night's tension. Maya tried to focus, forcing her mind away from the adrenaline-fueled panic. She couldn't afford to get caught up in fear now. She had a mission. Max, ever the protector, trotted beside her as they walked to Harper's car. He'd been alert since the moment they left the safe house, his ears pricked, his tail low. Maya had come to trust his instincts, they had saved her more times than she could count. The car was quiet as they drove through the empty streets, the hum of the engine the only sound that filled the air. Harper's eyes were fixed on the road, his hands gripping the wheel with determination. Maya sat beside him, Max curled up at her feet, his breathing steady. But inside, Maya was anything but calm. They reached the outskirts of town, where the streets grew quieter, more isolated. A thick fog clung to the ground, swirling in the dim light of the street lamps. The bar Veronica had mentioned loomed ahead, a rundown building that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades. The neon sign above flickered, casting a sickly green glow on the pavement. "This is it," Harper said, pulling into a parking spot just down the street. "Stay close, and don't let your guard down." Maya nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. This was it, the moment they would either find the information they needed or fall into a trap. The uncertainty hung heavy in the air. As they approached the entrance, Max growled low under his breath, his body tense. Maya kept a hand on his leash, urging him to stay quiet, but she couldn't help but feel the same unease. There was something about this place, something that didn't sit right. Inside, the bar was dimly lit, with smoke hanging in the air and the low murmur of voices blending with the clinking of glasses. The patrons didn't seem to notice or care as Maya and Harper walked in. The bartender, a man in his 50s with a gruff demeanor, eyed them suspiciously. "We're looking for Damon Parks," Harper said, his voice calm but firm. "We don't want any trouble. Just need to talk." The bartender studied them for a long moment before nodding toward the back of the bar. "Second booth on the left," he muttered. "He's been here for the last couple of hours." Maya's stomach flipped. This could be it. They could finally get the answers they needed. But as they walked toward the booth, her heart skipped a beat, she wasn't alone. The figure sitting in the booth had his back to them, but Maya could already feel the weight of his presence. This was it. Damon Parks. And everything was about to change. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The dimly lit booth in the back of the bar smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke. As Maya and Harper approached, the man sitting there turned slightly, giving them just enough of a glimpse of his face to know they had found Damon Parks. He was older than Maya had expected, probably in his mid-40s, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent on the wrong side of the law. His eyes, sharp and calculating, swept over them, and for a moment, Maya thought he might not say a word. But then, a slow, knowing smile crept across his lips. "You must be the ones causing all the trouble," Damon said, his voice low, with a slight rasp. "I've been hearing about you too. You're brave, I'll give you that. But I can't say I like being dragged into this mess." Maya's pulse quickened. There was no mistaking the tension in his voice. He wasn't just a bystander, he was entangled in this in ways that could make or break their mission. Harper stepped forward, keeping his tone firm but friendly. "We don't want trouble," Harper said. "We just need information. We know you have it. Cross is about to make a move that will destroy everything. We need to stop him, Damon. Help us, and we can help you." Damon's gaze flicked to Max, who was sitting calmly by Maya's side, alert and waiting for any sign of danger. Damon raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Instead, he leaned back in his booth, stretching his arms behind his head, his eyes narrowing as if weighing the situation. "I've worked with Cross for years," Damon said finally. "You think you can just walk in here, ask for my help, and I'll hand you the keys to all the dirty secrets? It doesn't work that way." Harper didn't flinch. "We're offering you a chance to make things right. Cross isn't your ally, Damon. He's not loyal to anyone. He's using you. And the people like you." Damon's smile faded slightly, and for the first time, something like uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He didn't speak immediately, which only made the silence heavier. Maya could feel the air thickening around them. If they were going to get through to him, now was the time. "You think you know me?" Damon finally asked, his voice sharp now. "You think you know what's at stake? This isn't some game where you get to walk away with a happy ending. Cross doesn't play that way. He doesn't leave survivors." Maya felt a chill creep down her spine. This wasn't just about stopping Cross. It was about survival, her own, and the lives of everyone she cared about. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind, "They'll come after you if you get too close." "We're not walking away," Maya said, her voice tight with determination. "I'm already too far in to back out now. And neither are you. Help us, Damon. We're not asking for a favor. We're asking you to choose a side." For a long moment, Damon didn't move, and Maya was sure that the weight of their words was hanging in the balance. Then, just as she thought he would dismiss them, he leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "I don't trust you," he said, his voice low, "but I don't trust Cross even more." "You're right. He's been using people like me for far too long. I don't know if I can stop him, but I do know he's playing a dangerous game. A game that's going to catch up with all of us." Maya felt a flicker of hope, but Damon wasn't finished yet. "Here's the thing," he continued. "Cross has something. Something big. But it's not just about power or money. He's been working on something that could destroy everything. He's already sent people to find it. I've been trying to get to it first, but it's like trying to chase a shadow." Maya leaned in closer, her heart pounding. "What is it? What does he have?" Damon hesitated again, his eyes flicking toward the door as if he was checking for anyone who might be listening. After a long pause, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what, it's who," he said. "Cross is looking for someone. Someone who's got information on a much larger operation. It's bigger than anything you've seen before. The people who are pulling the strings behind him, they have a plan, and it involves a lot more than just money. It involves power, global power." Maya's mind raced. A person? Someone who has information. This wasn't just about a corrupt business deal or illegal operations, it was something much darker, much bigger. "And you know where they are?" Harper asked, leaning forward, his voice tense. Damon shook his head. "I don't know where they are, but I know how Cross is going to find them. He's been looking for a signal, something to lead him to them. And I've seen it. I've seen the signal once. A little black girl." Maya's breath caught in her throat. A little black girl. The words hit her like a slap. She felt her mind go blank for a moment, trying to piece together what Damon was saying. "The signal," Damon continued, his eyes locking onto Maya's, "it's a code. A gesture. If you've been near Cross's people long enough, you've seen it before. A way of letting them know you're close, letting them know you've got the key to finding her." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She thought back to her earlier conversations with her mother. The strange sense of urgency. The cryptic messages. Had her mother known? Had she been protecting something, or someone? A signal. A little girl. Harper shot Maya a questioning look, sensing her confusion, but Damon wasn't done. He was leaning in now, his voice filled with urgency. "I know you're looking for answers, but they're not going to come easy. Cross is more dangerous than you realize. And if you're truly searching for the truth, you'll have to understand the cost. This isn't just about exposing him, it's about survival. You might not walk out of this alive. Maya's mind raced. A little black girl. The pieces were falling into place, but there was so much left unsaid, so many questions still unanswered. What's the next step? Harper asked, breaking through Maya's thoughts. Damon looked from Maya to Harper and then back again. For the first time, there was a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. The next step is getting to her before Cross does, Damon said. And trust me, if you want to beat him, you're going to need all the help you can get. The clock is ticking. The weight of Damon's words hung heavy in the air as Maya, Harper, and Max left the bar. Every step felt like a silent countdown, ticking away their time. Maya's mind spun with 100 questions, but the most pressing one was clear: who was this little black girl, and why was she so important? Harper drove in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Max, usually alert and on edge in moments like these, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation and lay still in the back seat. Even he was subdued, his usual energy quieted by the ominous tension that had settled over them. Maya's thoughts were a whirlwind. The more Damon had said, the more she realized how little she actually knew about the true scope of the danger they were facing. Cross wasn't just a criminal mastermind trying to control some shady deals. He was involved in something much darker, something that involved global power. And this little girl, a child, was somehow the key to it all. A shiver ran down Maya's spine at the thought. A signal? A gesture? Her mind flashed to the moment her mother had been taken from her, the fleeting look of warning in her eyes before everything had fallen apart. Could it be that this girl was somehow connected to her mother's death? Was her mother trying to protect this child, or was there more to her mother's story than Maya had ever understood? Harper, Maya finally said, her voice quiet, but determined. We need to find this girl. We need to know what Damon meant by the signal. This is bigger than we thought. Harper nodded, his eyes scanning the dark road ahead. We will. But we need to be smart about it. We can't just rush in blindly. Cross has eyes everywhere, and if we get too reckless, we're not going to make it out in one piece. Maya wasn't sure whether Harper was speaking to her or himself, but the weight of his words sunk in. She knew they couldn't afford to make mistakes, but time was running out. If Cross found the girl before they did, it would all be over. As they approached the safe house, Maya's mind wandered back to the last conversation she had with her mother. If something ever happens to me, promise me you'll finish what I started. You'll find the truth. The truth. Maya had no idea what the truth was, but she was starting to see glimpses of it now. This wasn't just about her family or even about Cross, it was about something much larger than all of them. There were powerful people behind all of this, pulling strings in ways that no one could fully comprehend. Harper pulled into the driveway, parking the car beside the house. Maya stepped out, her thoughts still racing. Max followed closely behind her, his nose twitching, his senses alert. They couldn't afford to let their guard down, not for a second. Inside the house, Carter was already waiting for them. He glanced up from his laptop as they entered, his face grim. I've been going through the records you brought back, he said, his voice low. I found something. It's not much, but it's a lead. Cross has a contact, a woman who's been tied to his operations for years. Her name is Elena Sato. She's rumored to be the one who arranged the meeting between Cross and his higher-ups. There's a chance she knows something about this little girl. About the signal. Maya felt a surge of hope, but it was fleeting. Elena Sato. Another name, another mystery in a growing list of connections. Could she really be the missing piece of the puzzle? Where is she? Maya asked, her voice sharp. I don't have her exact location yet, Carter replied, tapping away at his keyboard. But I'm narrowing it down. She's not exactly the type to be easy to find. She's always been careful. But if anyone knows what's going on behind the scenes, it's her. Harper was already moving toward the door, his jacket in hand. Let's go. We don't have much time. It wasn't long before they were on the road again, heading into the heart of the city. The streets were crowded with late-night traffic, and the air seemed thick with a sense of urgency. The clock was ticking, and they were running out of time to catch up with Elena Sato before Cross did. Maya's stomach churned. The more she thought about the signal and the little girl, the more she felt like they were diving deeper into a game they didn't fully understand. It was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands, slippery, elusive, dangerous. Finally, Carter's voice crackled through their earpieces. I've got something. Elena's at a bar near the docks. She's meeting with someone. If we hurry, we might be able to catch her. Harper's foot pressed down harder on the accelerator as he swerved through the city streets. The docks were only a few miles away, but it felt like an eternity before they finally arrived. The area around the docks was dark and quiet, the only light coming from the flickering street lamps that lined the roads. A few old warehouses stood in the distance, casting long shadows across the pavement. They parked a block away, careful to stay out of sight. Max, sensing the tension, was on high alert, his ears perked and his eyes scanning the shadows. We need to move quickly, Harper whispered. Stay close, stay quiet. The three of them moved through the dark alleyways, keeping to the edges of the buildings to avoid being seen. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow as she focused on every sound, every movement around them. She could feel Max's presence beside her, grounding her, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this. Finally, they reached the bar. The windows were tinted, making it difficult to see inside. Maya's heart skipped a beat when she saw the faint outline of a figure through the glass. Someone was sitting at the bar, and their posture was unmistakable. Elena Sato. Without a word, Harper signaled to Maya and Carter to stay back. He stepped forward, keeping to the shadows, his eyes fixed on the door. The next few minutes would be crucial. If they spooked Elena, they might lose their chance to find out what she knew. Maya's pulse raced as Harper carefully pushed the door open, slipping inside with the grace of someone used to operating in the shadows. Maya and Carter followed, keeping close behind. Inside, the dim light from the bar gave the room a muted, almost surreal atmosphere. Elena sat at the counter, her back to them, but her presence was unmistakable. She was confident, poised, a woman who wasn't easily rattled. Harper moved silently, taking a seat at the bar beside her. For a long moment, Elena didn't acknowledge him, but the faintest tilt of her head indicated she knew they were there. You've got a lot of nerve, Harper, she said coolly, her voice smooth like silk. I wasn't expecting company tonight. Harper smiled grimly. We both know you don't make moves without knowing who's watching, Elena. The question is, what do you know about Cross's latest plans? Her lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You should have stayed away. It's not too late to turn back. Maya's heart raced. This was it. The answers they needed were within reach, but Elena wasn't going to give them up easily. Elena's eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating light as she shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey. The air between them thickened with an unspoken challenge, and Maya could feel the tension creeping up her spine. She had been in confrontations before, but something about this woman, her calm composure and the weight of the silence, sent a chill through her. Harper didn't back down, though. He leaned slightly forward, his voice steady but edged with urgency. Cross is playing a game, Elena. The problem is, it's one that's bigger than either of us. We need to know what you're involved in. What are you hiding? Elena's lips curved into a small smile, as if she enjoyed this little dance. I'm hiding nothing. And I certainly don't owe you any explanations. Her words were smooth, but Maya could sense the underlying layers of her story. Elena wasn't just some silent partner in Cross's operations. She was a key player, someone who knew far more than she was letting on. The question wasn't just about Cross, it was about this signal, this mysterious little girl that Damon had mentioned. Maya's thoughts raced as she mentally pieced together what Damon had said about Elena being connected to the higher-ups in the operation. Maya took a step closer to the bar, her gaze fixed on Elena. She didn't trust her, but she knew one thing for sure, if anyone could lead them to answers, it was her. "We know about the signal," Maya said, her voice steady, but with an edge. "We know it's tied to someone. Someone you've been working with. Someone that Cross is desperate to find." Elena's eyes flicked toward Maya, and for a moment, the briefest shadow of something like recognition crossed her face. But it was gone almost instantly, replaced by that same calm indifference. "The signal?" Elena said, as if the words were foreign to her. "I think you're chasing ghosts. Or maybe you're trying to get me to admit something that isn't true." Maya didn't buy it. Elena knew exactly what they were talking about. Damon's warning echoed in her mind, the signal. A little black girl. A way of letting them know you're close. This wasn't just about some coded message. It was about power, and about keeping someone hidden that was far too valuable for Cross to ever let go. "Elena, this isn't a game," Harper said, his tone low but intense. "We don't have time to play around. We know Cross has been looking for this girl. We know he'll stop at nothing to find her. And if we don't stop him first, it's going to get worse." There was a flicker of something in Elena's expression. Was it doubt, fear, or just cold calculation? Maya couldn't tell, but she could feel the room shifting, as if Elena were considering something important. "Cross has nothing to do with it," Elena replied, her voice firm. "He's just a pawn. He's been used just like the rest of us. But what you don't understand is that there's something much bigger going on. Something that none of us fully comprehend." The words hit Maya like a punch to the gut. Elena was telling them that there was more to this than just Cross's criminal empire. Something bigger. What did that mean? "I'm listening," Maya said, her voice steady, but her heart pounding in her chest. "What's bigger than Cross? What's this about?" Elena took a long sip from her glass, her eyes flicking over to the window, as if she were checking for anyone nearby. The bar was quiet, but Maya could feel Elena's eyes scanning the shadows, her mind working. Finally, she spoke, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. "Cross isn't the real enemy here. He's a tool. A distraction. The people who have been pulling his strings, those are the ones you should be worried about. And as for the girl, well, she's part of something much larger than all of this. She's the key to stopping a much greater threat." Maya's mind raced. The girl is the key. What did that mean? And who were these people Elena was talking about? Who are they? Harper asked, his voice demanding an answer. Elena hesitated. Her gaze flicked to the door again, and for a moment, it felt like she might close off completely. But instead, she took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her words were heavy, laden with meaning. "They're a group. A hidden faction. They've been manipulating governments, corporations, even entire regions of the world for years. And Cross? He was their tool. Their puppet. But now they're looking for something, or rather, someone. This girl." Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she processed Elena's words. Manipulating governments. Running global operations from the shadows. This was no longer about some underground syndicate, it was a web of power that stretched across continents. And why is she so important? Maya pressed, her voice almost a whisper now. Elena's lips parted slightly, and she seemed to weigh the decision to continue. The moment stretched on, thick with the tension of secrets on the brink of being exposed. Then, finally, she spoke. "Because she knows everything," Elena said, her voice barely audible. She's the one who has the information they need to control everything. The way they're going to reshape the world. She's not just a girl, she's a symbol. The last piece of the puzzle. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't just about saving a girl. This was about stopping a catastrophe, something that could alter the very balance of power in the world. And Cross is going to kill her to keep her silent, Elena continued, her eyes narrowing. But you don't understand. If she's gone, if they get rid of her, the world as we know it will change forever. That's why they've been hunting her down, using every tool at their disposal. She holds the future in her hands. The weight of her words sank in like a stone. Maya could barely breathe. They had been running in circles, chasing ghosts, and now it was clear, the girl was the key to everything. If they didn't find her first, they might lose the last chance to prevent the world from slipping into chaos. Harper turned to Maya, his eyes locked on hers. We need to find her, now. Before it's too late. Maya nodded. There was no time to waste. The clock wasn't just ticking anymore, it was racing. As they left the bar, the chill of the night air hit Maya like a wave. The weight of everything Elena had revealed pressed down on her, but there was no turning back now. This wasn't just about her mother anymore. It wasn't just about Cross or the girl. It was about something far bigger, a conspiracy that had the potential to bring the world to its knees. They had no time to waste. The hunt for the girl was on. The streets blurred as Harper sped through the city, the hum of the engine matching the quick beat of Maya's heart. Everything had shifted in an instant. The hunt for the little girl had morphed into something far larger, something global. As if in a single breath, Maya had gone from investigating a murder to possibly preventing a worldwide catastrophe. She glanced over at Harper, who, as always, seemed focused and in control, though his jaw was tight, the strain in his eyes betraying the stress of what lay ahead. Do you believe her? Maya asked, her voice low, still grappling with the gravity of Elena's revelation. Harper's hands tightened around the wheel as he steered the car down a narrow alleyway. I don't trust anyone in this game, Maya. But she's not lying about everything. Cross is a pawn, and whoever's behind him has been pulling the strings long before we got involved. Maya turned her attention back to the road, her thoughts swirling like a storm. If Elena was right, and she had no reason to believe she wasn't, then the girl, this child who had been hiding in the shadows, was not just an innocent bystander in a war she didn't understand. She was the linchpin. The girl was the key to the power that could reshape the world. Whoever controlled her controlled everything. Then where do we go from here? Maya asked, breaking the silence. We go after the girl, Harper replied, his tone unwavering. But we need to be smart about it. Cross has eyes everywhere, and we don't even know where she is yet. If we rush in, we might scare her off, or worse. Maya nodded, her mind racing. Elena had hinted that the girl wasn't just hiding, she was protected, probably by people who knew how dangerous she was. But they were running out of time. Every moment they delayed, Cross and his shadowy benefactors got closer to finding her. We need to get to Elena's contact, Carter's voice crackled through their earpieces. I've managed to trace a phone number linked to her. It's a long shot, but it might lead us to the girl. Maya's pulse quickened. Where? She's in the outskirts of the city, near the old docks, Carter replied, his voice tight. We don't have much time. Cross is already circling. Thanks, Carter, Harper said, cutting the conversation short as he sped through a red light, heading for the docks. The cityscape blurred around them as they reached the industrial district. The air was thick with salt and oil from the water, the smell of decay drifting from long-abandoned factories. This was no place for a child, let alone a girl who held the key to untold power. Maya's mind was still spinning, trying to connect the dots. Elena had spoken of a hidden faction, a shadowy group manipulating global events for their gain. And now, Cross, the man who had been tormenting her family, was just a pawn in their game. But the more she thought about it, the more it became clear that Elena wasn't just a bystander in all of this. She knew more than she let on. She was tied to the larger conspiracy in ways that neither Maya nor Harper fully understood. Elena's reluctance to reveal everything to them meant she had her own agenda, and Maya was sure it wasn't aligned with theirs. "Hold on," Harper muttered as he swerved the car to avoid a construction truck. "We're almost there." The docks were eerily quiet, the streets deserted. An occasional rustle of paper or the distant sound of water lapping at the shore were the only noises breaking the silence. Maya's skin prickled with unease as she looked out the window, half expecting to see shadows move in the dark. Harper pulled into an abandoned lot near the end of a pier, his headlights cutting through the darkness. There was no sign of life, but Maya knew better than to assume everything was as it seemed. This place was a perfect hideout, a dead zone where people could vanish without a trace. "Stay sharp," Harper said as he turned off the engine. "We don't know who's watching." Max let out a low growl from the back seat, sensing the tension, and Maya placed a hand on his head to calm him. The dog had been through a lot with her, and she could tell he wasn't as relaxed as he usually was. "Let's go," Maya said, stepping out of the car. They moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows, their eyes scanning the surroundings. The docks were a maze of crumbling warehouses, rusted chains, and abandoned containers. But there, at the far end of the pier, a figure stood. A woman, tall and cloaked in a long dark coat, her back to them. She was waiting. "That's her," Harper whispered, his voice barely audible. Maya felt her pulse quicken. It had to be Elena's contact. The timing was perfect. But there was something about the woman's posture, something deliberate about how still she was, that made Maya uneasy. Without a word, they approached, staying low and cautious. As they got closer, the woman turned, her eyes piercing through the darkness. There was something cold about her, something almost predatory. "You've come," she said softly, her voice smooth, calculated. "I've been waiting for you." Maya felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was no ordinary contact. The woman's calm demeanor was unsettling, but it was the glint in her eyes that unnerved Maya the most. She was involved in something far deeper than she let on, and Maya couldn't help but feel like they were stepping into something they weren't ready for. "We're looking for the girl," Harper said, his voice steady, but his tone firm. "The one Cross is hunting. She's the key to everything, and we need to find her first." The woman's lips curled into a slight smile. "You think she's the key, don't you? The girl is important, yes. But not for the reasons you believe." Maya's heart skipped. The woman wasn't denying their search, she was toying with them, her cryptic words sending a clear message. There was more to this than anyone had realized. "What do you mean?" Maya asked, stepping forward, her eyes never leaving the woman. The woman's smile deepened. "You think finding the girl will solve everything? That stopping Cross will fix it all? There are far bigger forces at play. Things that even I can't control." Before Maya could respond, there was a loud noise, a crack of gunfire echoed from the shadows, and everything went into slow motion. Max barked sharply, his body tensing as he leaped into action, but Harper was already pulling Maya down behind a container. The woman moved with alarming speed, ducking behind the same container. "Stay down," Harper hissed, his eyes scanning for the shooter. "Get to cover." As the sound of footsteps grew louder, the woman's cryptic words echoed in Maya's mind, "There are far bigger forces at play." In that instant, Maya realized that finding the girl was just the beginning. The real battle was just about to begin. The gunfire echoed through the docks, each shot ringing out with a deadly certainty that made Maya's blood run cold. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pressed her back against the cold metal of the shipping container, trying to steady her breath. Max was by her side, his muscles coiled and ready for action, his ears pinned flat against his head, sensing the danger before anyone else. Harper crouched beside her, his hand gripping his gun tightly, eyes scanning the shadows. "Stay down," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the sound of distant sirens and the occasional creak of the old, rusted warehouses around them. "We need to find where that shot came from. Whoever's out there knows we're here." The woman, still crouched behind the same container, barely moved. Her face was shadowed, but Maya could see the calculation in her eyes as she analyzed the situation. Maya's instincts told her this wasn't the first time the woman had been under fire. She was calm, composed, dangerously so. Another round of shots rang out, striking the metal container above them. The noise was deafening. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she gave a subtle signal, a flick of her hand. Without a word, she darted to the side, moving quickly and silently into the darkness of the dockyard. Maya hesitated for a moment, then followed, motioning for Harper to keep up. They could either stay huddled in their hiding place, risking being pinned down, or they could chase the woman and hope she could lead them to the answers they needed. "Go!" Maya whispered urgently, as she sprinted after the woman. Max was right behind her, his paws hitting the ground with an urgent thud. Harper was right at her heels, his pace matching hers. They ran in silence, the only sound the pounding of their feet on the gravel and the occasional rustle of discarded shipping crates. The docks were a labyrinth, a maze of steel and shadows. Every turn seemed to lead deeper into the heart of the city's forgotten underbelly, a place where no one would care to look for answers, or the girl they were hunting. The woman stopped abruptly, her figure blending into the darkness. Maya almost ran into her but managed to stop just in time, her breath heavy, her eyes wide. The woman raised a hand, signaling them to be quiet. They were close now, close enough that Maya could almost feel the weight of their pursuers bearing down on them. Whoever had fired those shots was still out there, moving in the same eerie silence that seemed to permeate the docks. Maya swallowed hard, her mind racing through the possibilities. "Who are they?" Maya whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Who's shooting at us?" The woman turned her head slightly, her lips curling into something like a smile. "You're being hunted, all of you. They know you're getting too close to the truth." Maya's stomach twisted. She had suspected as much, but hearing the words out loud made it real. Cross's men weren't just looking for the girl, they were looking for them. They knew they were getting too close to unraveling something big. Harper moved silently beside Maya, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. "We can't keep running. We need answers. If you know who's behind all this, you need to tell us." The woman's eyes flickered with something, amusement or perhaps just cold indifference. "You think you can stop them? Stop what's already been set in motion?" she asked, her voice tinged with a bitter edge. "We're going to try," Harper replied, his tone unflinching. She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion, as though she was seeing them for the first time. "You have no idea what you're up against. There's more at stake here than you can understand. This isn't just about Cross, or the girl. This is a war, one that's been brewing for years." Maya frowned, the weight of her words sinking in. "A war? What are you talking about?" The woman stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with a sharp focus. "Cross is a distraction. He's a puppet in a much larger game. The girl, she's not just a piece, she's the last move. Whoever controls her, controls everything." The realization hit Maya like a punch to the gut. The girl wasn't just a key to unraveling the mystery, she was the final piece in a global puzzle, the one thing that could tilt the scales of power in favor of whoever controlled her. Maya took a deep breath, her mind racing. "We need to find her. Now." The woman held up a hand. "It's not that simple. Cross is looking for her, yes, but he's not the only one. You think you're the only ones who want to find the girl first?" She let the question hang in the air for a moment. "There are others, more powerful people who will stop at nothing to get to her. Harper's grip on his gun tightened. Who are they? Who's pulling the strings? But the woman didn't answer. Instead, she turned away, her figure melting into the shadows once more. Follow me, she said softly, her voice a ghostly whisper. I'll show you where she's hiding. But you have to understand, you're not ready for what's coming. Once you see her, there's no turning back. Maya hesitated for only a moment before following her, knowing that there was no other choice. They were already too far into this, too deep to pull back now. If there was any hope of stopping the chaos, of protecting the girl, they had to keep moving forward. They walked in silence, the darkened dock stretching out before them, a labyrinth of twisted metal and rusting ships. Maya's mind was spinning, trying to process everything she had learned. The girl was important, yes, but why? Why had she been hidden away in such a dangerous place? What was it that Cross, and these other mysterious forces, wanted from her? The woman led them to a secluded warehouse at the far end of the docks, its windows covered in grime and its doors slightly ajar. She paused at the entrance and turned to them. This is where she's been hiding, the woman said, her voice low. But you need to understand, this isn't just about finding her. It's about what she knows. And once you know what she knows, there's no going back. Harper stepped forward, his gun still drawn, but his posture was more relaxed now. He nodded at Maya. Let's go. The woman stepped aside to let them pass. As they entered the warehouse, the cold, damp air hit them. The darkness was thick here, the only sound the creaking of old wood and the distant drip of water somewhere in the shadows. Inside, Maya's heart skipped as she saw the faint silhouette of a small figure huddled in the corner. A little girl, no older than 7 or 8, with wide, fearful eyes staring at them. This was it. This was the girl who could change everything. The warehouse was suffocating in its silence. The air was thick with dust, a smell of rust and age that made Maya's lungs ache. She moved forward cautiously, her eyes locked on the small figure in the corner. The girl, no more than 8 years old, huddled beneath a tattered blanket, her wide eyes watching them with a mix of fear and curiosity. There was something so fragile about her, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her tiny shoulders. Max, the ever-watchful protector, stood by Maya's side, his ears perked and his muscles tense. The girl didn't seem afraid of the dog, though. She simply watched, her expression unreadable. Maya's heart clenched. It was hard to imagine that this innocent child was the key to a battle for global power. She looked so small, so helpless. How could someone like her be caught in the middle of something so dangerous? Harper stepped forward cautiously, his hand still gripping his gun, though his posture had softened slightly. He wasn't sure whether to trust the woman who had led them here, but one thing was clear, they had no other option now but to face the truth. The woman had disappeared into the shadows, leaving them alone with the girl. The only sound in the warehouse was the faint drip of water somewhere far in the back and the soft rustling of the girl's blanket as she shifted slightly. Hey, Maya said gently, kneeling down to the girl's level. Are you okay? We're here to help you. The girl didn't speak. She didn't even move at first. Maya's heart ached. The girl's silence spoke volumes. She was scared, and who could blame her? Her entire life had probably been turned upside down, dragged into a game of power she had no understanding of. But there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, a knowing that sent a chill through Maya. Harper moved closer, his voice low but firm. We know who you are. We're not here to hurt you. We're trying to stop them. The girl flinched at the sound of his voice, but she didn't back away. Her small hand reached out from under the blanket, trembling. Slowly, Maya extended her hand, offering comfort, hoping to bridge the gap between them. The girl hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took Maya's hand. You're safe, Maya whispered, her voice soothing. The girl's hand felt cold, like ice, but there was a warmth in her touch that spoke of something deeper, something powerful. Her fingers trembled as she clutched Maya's hand, and Maya couldn't help but wonder just how much the girl understood of the danger surrounding her. The silence stretched between them, and Maya could almost hear the thoughts swirling in the girl's mind, the confusion, the fear, the burden of being more than she ever realized. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the girl spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're coming for me," she said, her voice shaky but clear. "They always are." Maya's chest tightened at her words. It was clear now, this wasn't just about Cross or even the mysterious figures behind him. The girl was being hunted, not just by them, but by forces far greater. She was more than just a pawn in a power struggle, she was the epicenter of something much larger than anything Maya had anticipated. "I know," Maya replied softly, her heart heavy. "But we're going to stop them. We'll keep you safe." The girl looked up at her, eyes wide with something that looked like both hope and disbelief. "Can you really stop them?" she asked, her voice so small it nearly broke Maya's heart. Maya swallowed hard. The girl's innocence was a stark reminder of how much was at stake. They had to stop the forces that were after her, no matter the cost. But Maya wasn't sure they were ready for what was coming next. Before she could respond, a loud noise echoed from outside the warehouse, shuffling footsteps and the low hum of engines. Someone was coming. Maya's pulse quickened. Cross's men. Or worse, whoever was controlling them. She couldn't afford to hesitate. Harper moved swiftly, his eyes narrowing. "We need to move. Now." Maya gently pulled the girl to her feet, her heart pounding as she tried to keep her composure. "We have to go," she said urgently. "Can you run?" The girl nodded silently, her grip on Maya's hand tightening. Despite her fear, there was a resilience in her, the kind of resilience that only came from surviving something far darker than anyone her age should ever have to endure. Max growled lowly, his body tense as he stayed close, watching for any movement outside. Harper kept his gun raised, his eyes scanning every corner of the warehouse, every shadow, ready to react to whatever threat emerged. The noise outside grew louder, and Maya's heart skipped a beat. Whoever was coming was close. Too close. "Go," Harper urged. "We'll cover you." Maya nodded and began pulling the girl toward the exit. As they reached the door, the sound of approaching footsteps grew deafening. They weren't alone anymore. And they wouldn't have much time before they were surrounded. Max barked sharply, and Maya looked back just in time to see two dark figures step out from behind a stack of crates. Both were armed, their eyes trained on them, and their presence made the air thick with tension. "Move!" Harper yelled, and without thinking, Maya tugged the girl along, pulling her into a sprint. The figures didn't hesitate. They were on them in an instant. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, but Maya didn't dare look back. She had one mission now, keep the girl safe. Nothing else mattered. The warehouse door slammed behind them with a loud crash, and the cold night air hit Maya's face, stinging her skin. They ran toward the street, their footsteps pounding against the pavement as they made their way to the car. The girl, surprisingly fast for her size, kept up, her fear pushing her forward. "Get in!" Harper shouted as they reached the car. Max leapt into the back seat, and Maya shoved the girl inside before jumping in herself. Harper slammed the door shut and jumped into the driver's seat, turning the engine on with a roar. As they sped away from the docks, Maya glanced over at the girl. Her face was still pale, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something Maya couldn't quite place. It was as though she knew the fight was far from over. Maya's heart beat heavily in her chest. They had the girl, but they had no idea what kind of storm they were about to face. The forces after her were only growing stronger, and no matter how hard they tried to protect her, they were now targets, too. And Maya knew one thing for sure, they were all about to be pulled deeper into a battle that had been raging long before any of them realized. The city blurred past them as Harper pushed the car to its limits, weaving in and out of traffic with practiced ease. The night was thick, the sky overcast with clouds heavy with rain, casting a gloomy pallor over the streets. Maya's mind raced as they sped through the winding roads, her thoughts scrambling to catch up with the reality of the situation. The girl sat silently in the back seat beside her, staring out the window with wide, haunted eyes. Maya didn't know what to say. How could she explain to this child that she was now caught in a war she didn't understand? How could she promise her safety when Maya herself wasn't even sure they could outrun the danger closing in? Max was alert, his body tense as he watched out the window, his low growl a constant reminder that they were not alone. Every turn they made felt like another step deeper into the unknown, a path that was becoming more and more treacherous by the second. Harper's jaw was set in a grim line as he navigated the streets. He was doing his best to stay calm, but Maya could see the tension in his posture. They both knew they were in uncharted territory now. There were no easy answers, no safe places left. "We need to get off the road," Harper said abruptly, his voice tight with urgency. "We can't keep driving like this. They'll track us down. We need somewhere secure." Maya nodded, her heart thudding in her chest. "Where do we go? We don't exactly have the luxury of a safe house." Harper's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning for any sign of pursuit. "I have a contact. He owes me a favor." Maya raised an eyebrow. "A contact? Are you sure he's going to help us?" Harper's expression was unreadable. "He's the best chance we've got right now." Before Maya could respond, the car made a sharp turn off the main road, heading toward a quieter, industrial area of the city. The buildings here were old, their faded exteriors telling the story of a once thriving district now left to decay. It was the kind of place most people avoided, a hidden corner of the city where the underworld had its roots. They pulled into a narrow alley, the sound of the engine humming as they coasted to a stop. Harper turned off the car, the sudden silence pressing down on them. The dim streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, making it feel like they were alone in a forgotten part of the world. Harper glanced at Maya. "Stay in the car," he said sharply. "I'll make sure it's safe." Maya hesitated. She wanted to argue, to insist that they couldn't afford to waste any more time, but she knew Harper was right. They couldn't risk drawing attention. She nodded, her gaze briefly meeting the girl's, who was still staring out the window with that unsettling, faraway look in her eyes. Max let out a soft whine, his ears perked, as if sensing the unease in the air. Maya placed a hand on his head, trying to offer him some comfort, though she didn't feel particularly comforted herself. Harper stepped out of the car and disappeared into the shadows of the alley, leaving them in the tense silence. The rain began to fall, a light drizzle at first, but it quickly turned heavier, pattering against the roof of the car like a drumbeat. Maya leaned back in her seat, her thoughts a jumble. What was going on? Who was behind all this? The girl's mysterious past, Cross's obsession with her, and the dangerous men who were willing to kill for whatever secret she held, it was all connected, but the threads were too tangled to pull apart. And now they were all caught in the middle. The girl shifted beside her, her small form still rigid. Maya turned to her, her voice gentle. "Hey, it's going to be okay. We're getting you out of here. You're safe now." The girl's eyes flicked to Maya for a moment, but she didn't speak. She just stared at her, her expression unreadable. Maya wanted to reach out, to offer her some comfort, but she knew better than to push. The girl had been through too much already. Whatever fear or trauma she carried, Maya didn't have the words to fix it. Max whined again, his body tense. Maya's breath caught in her throat. There was something off about the way he was acting. He wasn't just alert, he was on edge, as if sensing something she couldn't see. Before she could react, the sound of footsteps echoed in the alley. Heavy and deliberate. Maya's heart stopped. They weren't alone. The threat was closing in. She quickly glanced around, her mind racing. There was nowhere to run. No way to hide. And then, just as the panic started to set in, Harper's voice cut through the tension. "It's clear," he said, appearing from the shadows and returning to the car. "Let's move." Maya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Harper didn't wait for her to respond. He opened the door and slid into the driver's seat, his expression hard as he quickly started the engine. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, her voice low, her mind still racing. "I told you," Harper said, his tone grim. "We need to go to the contact. It's our best shot at getting answers." Maya nodded, but the knot in her stomach tightened. She didn't trust the situation, none of it felt right. The contact, the girl, the danger they were all in, it was like they were walking blindfolded into a storm that was getting stronger by the minute. As they drove deeper into the city, Maya's thoughts churned. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That someone was always one step behind them. And with every passing second, it felt like the walls were closing in. They arrived at a nondescript building on the edge of the city, a place that looked abandoned from the outside, but Maya could sense there was more to it than met the eye. Harper parked the car in front, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of trouble. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "Stay close, and don't trust anyone. Not even him." Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced at the girl. The small figure sitting next to her seemed more fragile than ever, and the weight of the situation felt heavier with every passing second. Whoever these people were, whoever was pulling the strings behind Cross and the other shadowy figures, they were playing a dangerous game. And Maya wasn't sure how much longer they could keep playing without getting caught. The air felt colder as they stepped out of the car, the damp rain soaking into their clothes as they made their way toward the building. The structure in front of them looked like it had been abandoned for years. Its cracked windows, peeling paint, and rusted metal doors gave it a sense of neglect. Yet, there was an unsettling stillness about it. It was almost as if it were hiding something, just waiting to reveal itself. Maya's pulse quickened as they approached the entrance. She wasn't sure what she expected to find inside, but it certainly wasn't peace. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and Max growled softly, his stance alert, as though sensing the same danger that Maya felt looming in the air. Harper led the way, his movements swift and purposeful, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. He didn't speak, but Maya knew he was just as on edge as she was. The girl had fallen silent again, her tiny hand gripping Maya's with surprising strength, as though she, too, could sense that something was off. They reached the door, and Harper knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in the cold air. It was a simple gesture, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary meeting. Whoever was inside this building, whoever Harper had called on, was likely to be involved in the dark web of secrets they were trying to untangle. A moment passed before the door creaked open slightly, revealing a pair of eyes staring out at them from the shadows. For a brief second, Maya thought the door might close again, but then the eyes softened, and the door was pulled wide open. "Harper," a gruff voice said, a man stepping into view. His face was rugged, with stubble that seemed to have taken residence on his jaw, and his eyes were sharp, calculating. His clothes were simple, dark, and functional, blending into the surroundings, as if he were someone who didn't want to be seen. "You're early," he said, his gaze flicking quickly to Maya and then to the girl. His eyes lingered on her for a split second too long, and something about that made Maya's stomach churn. "We need to talk," Harper replied, his voice low. "This is serious." The man nodded, stepping aside to allow them inside. As they entered, the dim light inside the building flickered, revealing a sparse, industrial interior. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of metal and oil. It was clear that the place had been set up for one purpose, discretion. "Get in," the man said, his tone final. "We don't have much time." Maya hesitated for a moment but then followed Harper into the building. The man led them through a series of narrow hallways, all of which seemed to have been carefully constructed to hide any trace of activity. It was the kind of place where you could disappear without leaving a trace. They came to a door at the end of the hallway, and the man stopped in front of it, glancing at each of them. "This way." Harper motioned for Maya to stay close. "Stay sharp," he whispered, and Maya nodded, her grip on the girl tightening. The girl was still quiet, her gaze focused on the floor as if she were trying to block out the chaos around her. Maya could sense the girl's fear, the weight of what was happening pressing down on her shoulders. The man opened the door, revealing a small, dimly lit room. It was furnished simply, just a few chairs, a table, and a computer in the corner. There was a single light hanging overhead, its glow flickering intermittently. The room felt more like a hideout than a safe house, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they had just walked deeper into a web of intrigue and danger. "Sit," the man said, his voice gruff. "We need to discuss things. All of it." Harper stepped forward and sat down at the table without hesitation. Maya followed suit, settling into one of the chairs beside him, the girl sitting quietly beside her. Max, ever watchful, took a position at the door, his gaze trained on the hallway behind them. The man leaned against the table, crossing his arms over his chest as he studied them, his eyes flicking between the three of them, landing momentarily on the girl again. "So," the man began, his voice low, "Harper says you need answers. I've been watching you, all of you, for a while now. You've been stirring up quite a storm, haven't you?" Maya's brow furrowed. "What do you know about us?" The man smirked, but it was a humorless expression. "I know enough. I know that this little girl here," he gestured toward the girl, "is at the center of something much bigger than you realize. And I know that people are coming for her. People who have no intention of letting you leave this city alive if you're not careful." Maya's stomach tightened at the words, but she didn't show it. "You're saying we're walking right into a trap?" The man's eyes darkened. "More like a game," he said softly. "And you're all playing pieces. The only question is how long you'll survive the game. Cross isn't the only player. There's a bigger picture here, one you can't even begin to imagine." Harper leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. "What do you know about the girl? Why is she so important?" The man sighed heavily, his gaze shifting to the girl once more. "Her name's Ava," he said, his voice softening just a fraction. "She doesn't know it, but she's the key to something ancient. Something that could change everything. If they get to her first, it's game over for all of us." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, something ancient?" The man's eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something real in his expression, concern, perhaps, or maybe even fear. "There are forces at play here that go back centuries," he said quietly. "The girl, Ava, is the linchpin. She holds the key to unlocking something that could reshape the balance of power across the world. It's not just a fight for money or control. It's a battle for something far more dangerous. A force that no one should have access to." Maya's mind reeled, the implications of what the man was saying slowly sinking in. Ava, this little girl, was at the center of a struggle that stretched back for generations. What kind of power could a child like her hold? What kind of forces were hunting her, willing to do anything to get their hands on her? The man's voice dropped to a whisper. "You've got to protect her, at all costs. There's no turning back now." Maya looked at the girl, her heart heavy with the weight of the truth she was just beginning to understand. Ava wasn't just running from people trying to capture her, she was running from a legacy she couldn't even comprehend. And now, they were all part of a game where the stakes were nothing less than the future of the world. The weight of the man's words lingered in the small, dimly lit room. The girl, Ava, was still silent, her expression distant as she sat beside Maya, clutching the fabric of her jacket as if trying to keep herself grounded. The secrets swirling around them were beginning to unfold, but with each revelation, Maya only felt the world growing heavier. Protect her at all costs, the man had said, his voice filled with urgency. But how could Maya protect a child from forces that were so far beyond her understanding? She was just a woman, caught in a war between shadowy organizations, with a dog who could sense danger but not stop it. What are we supposed to do? Harper's voice cut through Maya's thoughts. He leaned forward on the table, eyes piercing the man across from him, his expression hardening. If Cross and whoever else is after her want to control this ancient power, we're running out of time. The man, whose name Maya had yet to learn, gave a short nod. His eyes darkened with something more than just concern. This was personal. You're right. Time is the enemy. But it's not just Cross. There's a network, a syndicate of people who will stop at nothing to use Ava for their own ends. They've been hunting her for years. But now, it's more than just a chase. They've realized the true power of what she holds. Maya's heart skipped a beat. What exactly is she holding? She asked, her voice steady despite the terror rising in her chest. You said it's something ancient. But what does that even mean? The man exhaled sharply and took a moment before responding. It's called the Binding. A relic, an artifact, maybe even a curse. Whatever you want to call it, it's something old, older than civilization itself. But only one person can unlock it, someone with a bloodline connected to its origins. That's Ava. Harper straightened in his chair, his eyes flashing with recognition. That's why they want her. They need her to access it. The man nodded grimly. Exactly. And they're willing to kill anyone who stands in their way. Maya felt her stomach drop. She looked at Ava, who was now staring at her, her big, dark eyes filled with confusion, but also something else, fear. Ava didn't know what she was carrying, but the weight of it was already starting to crush them all. So, what now? Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her best effort to remain composed. You say we have to protect her, but how? We're sitting ducks in this place. The man's gaze hardened. That's why I called you here. There's a safe house. It's deep underground, far from here, but it's our only shot. I can get you there, but once you leave this building, there's no turning back. You'll be hunted, and if they catch you. I get it, Harper interrupted. But how do we know you're not just trying to get us out of the way so they can get to her? The man's eyes narrowed. Because if they get to her, we all lose. I'm not your enemy, but I'm also not here to babysit. I'm doing this because I don't want to see what happens if Ava falls into the wrong hands. The world is already teetering on the edge of something dark. What's in that artifact could tip it over. Maya didn't have time to question him further. There was no time for that now. What was more important was getting Ava out of the city, and fast. She looked at Harper, who gave her a barely perceptible nod. They had no other options. They had to trust this man, or at least take the chance. We'll go, Maya said, standing up, her voice steady despite the nerves crawling beneath her skin. But how do we get out without being seen? The man walked over to a wall, sliding aside a hidden panel to reveal a small elevator shaft. It was out of place in the otherwise industrial room, looking almost too new, as if it had been installed specifically for this moment. This elevator will take you underground, he said. It leads to the tunnels. From there, you'll be safe for a while. Safe how? Harper asked, his voice a bit sharper now. How long can we stay down there? The man turned back to them, his expression hard. As long as it takes. They won't find you immediately, but you'll have to move quickly. It's only a matter of time before they close in on this place. Maya nodded, turning to Ava. We're going to be okay, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince the girl or herself. Ava simply nodded, though her eyes were still filled with fear. It was as if Ava knew, deep down, that the worst was yet to come. The man gestured for them to follow him. He led them to the elevator and punched in a code that caused the doors to slide open with a soft chime. They stepped inside, the small space eerily silent as the doors closed behind them. As the elevator descended, Maya's heart pounded in her chest. The sound of the rain beating against the roof of the building above them felt like a distant memory. Now, it was only the hum of the elevator and the faint sound of Ava's soft breathing that filled the silence. The man turned to them one last time. "Once you're down there, you'll be safe for a while. But there's more you need to know. The binding isn't just a key to power. It's a weapon. If you don't know how to control it, it will destroy everything in its path." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying? Ava doesn't know how to control it. How could she?" The man met her gaze, his expression dark. "That's why you have to keep her safe. If she's not ready, if she doesn't learn how to harness it, then everything we know is at risk." Before Maya could respond, the elevator came to a sudden stop, and the doors opened with a soft hiss. They stepped out into the underground tunnel, the air cooler and thicker with humidity than above ground. The space was barren, save for a few flickering lights along the walls. "This is where we part ways," the man said quietly. "From here on, you're on your own. But don't trust anyone. Not even me. And most importantly, trust no one who comes looking for her." With that, he turned and disappeared back into the shadows of the tunnel. Maya took a deep breath. They were alone now. Alone in a world that was becoming more dangerous with every step. They had no choice but to move forward. But where would they go from here? And how long could they survive the storm that was surely coming? The tunnel stretched endlessly in front of them, a dark and damp passage that seemed to go on forever. The flickering lights above cast eerie shadows against the walls, making every sound feel amplified. Each footstep echoed loudly in the silence, each breath felt too loud. Maya tried to push the anxiety building in her chest to the back of her mind, focusing instead on what lay ahead. Ava had grown quieter the deeper they went. The girl was walking in front of Maya, her small hands tucked tightly into the sleeves of her oversized jacket. Her wide eyes flicked back every so often, as if trying to reassure herself that Maya was still there. Max, still ever vigilant, walked beside them, his ears perked and nose sniffing the air. "We have to find a way to protect her," Maya muttered, more to herself than to Harper, who walked ahead of her, scanning the path. If what that man said is true, Ava has no idea what she's carrying. Harper's face was hard, his mind clearly elsewhere. "We're running out of time. If Cross or anyone else comes after her down here." "They will," Maya interrupted. "You know they will. We can't outrun them forever." They came to a junction in the tunnel where the path split in two directions. Maya paused, her eyes flickering back and forth. Neither path seemed to offer a clear advantage. The air felt thicker here, and something about the place sent an uneasy shiver down her spine. "Which way?" she asked, glancing at Harper. Harper's gaze lingered on the left path for a long moment before he turned to the right. "The right's the safer choice. We can get through quicker that way. Stick close, stay sharp." Maya nodded, her heart racing in her chest. She felt like they were running out of time, like the darkness was closing in on them. But the sound of footsteps behind them, loud, echoing, unmistakable, made her stop dead in her tracks. Max growled low in his throat, his body stiffening. "Someone's coming," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Harper's head snapped back to the junction, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Damn it." Before they could even react, a figure stepped out from the darkened passage to their left. The person was tall, silhouetted by the weak lights above, but Maya could see enough to know they weren't alone. A group of people, each wearing masks, emerged from the shadows behind the first figure, their eyes trained on Ava. Maya's stomach dropped. This was it. The moment they'd been running from had arrived. "Run!" Harper shouted, and Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed Ava's hand and pulled her forward, sprinting down the right path as fast as she could, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind them, the sound of running footsteps grew louder. The group was chasing them. Max barked, his steps fast and sure as he ran beside them, his eyes darting between the path ahead and the shadows closing in behind. "Harper!" Maya called, looking back over her shoulder. "What do we do? We can't outrun them forever." Harper was already ahead of them, but his head turned back toward Maya with a fierce determination in his eyes. "We keep moving. Get to the end of this tunnel. We can't stop now." Maya pushed herself harder, her legs burning as she kept pace with Ava, who was holding on tightly to her. The girl's breath came fast and ragged, but Maya could tell she was trying to keep up, doing her best to stay with them, despite the terror in her eyes. The sound of footsteps was so close now it felt like the pursuers were breathing down their necks. Maya's pulse raced in time with their frantic steps, and her thoughts swirled. What if they didn't make it? What if they couldn't escape the people chasing them? What if they caught Ava? But then, just as she was about to lose hope, the tunnel ahead began to open up. A large metal door loomed in the distance, partially open, a faint glow of light spilling out. It was their only chance. Almost there. Harper yelled, his voice urging them on. They reached the door just as the first of their pursuers rounded the corner. Maya's hand gripped the handle, and with a force she didn't know she had, she yanked the door open, pulling Ava and Max through it and slamming it behind them. They were outside. But they were not safe yet. The night air hit them like a slap, cold and biting, but it was a relief compared to the stifling tunnel. They found themselves in a small, abandoned warehouse yard, the shadows stretching long under the dim light of nearby street lamps. The space was empty, save for a few scattered crates and broken equipment. There was no sign of the people chasing them, for now. Harper motioned for them to move quickly, and they hurried toward the cover of a nearby dumpster, their footsteps muffled by the soft dirt and gravel beneath them. Maya looked around, trying to get her bearings. She had no idea where they were, but they needed a plan. Before she could speak, though, Harper cut her off, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the distant road. "They'll be here any minute," he said, his voice low and tense. "What do we do?" Maya asked, her voice trembling with urgency. She could feel the weight of Ava's small hand in hers, and it reminded her how much was at stake. Harper's jaw tightened. "We make our stand here. If they're coming for her, we fight. We can't run anymore." The sound of cars approaching echoed in the distance. Their time was running out. Suddenly, there was a low growl. Max, who had been alert and quiet until now, began barking furiously, his fur standing on end. Maya turned just in time to see several shadowy figures emerging from the darkness, walking toward them with determined steps. "We don't have a choice," Harper muttered, his fists clenched at his sides. "Get ready." Maya's heart raced as she tightened her grip on Ava. This was it, the final confrontation. There was no more running. There was no more hiding. This was the fight for Ava's future. And for the future of everything they knew. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?